if y'all will bear with us for a second, we're going to make sure that everyone has time to get over here. We do, as y'all have noticed, things are picking up, and committee hearings are getting abundant. So we'll please be patient with us as we wait for a few more members. Give them time to show up. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully, more members will come in as we progress through the hearings. But do appreciate everyone showing up as we start to hear from Georgia Student Finance Commission. We're also going to hear from the Georgia Independent College Association today. Real quick, we're going to start with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this great state. May you give us wisdom and discernment as we go through and do the people's business. In thy name we pray. Amen. We're going to start with the Georgia Student Finance Commission and President Nugel, if you will. Noggle. I'm born Chuck Martin today. We're gonna get it right. Yes. All right.
Well, thank you for this opportunity again, Chairman, to be with you today and discuss our FY 2020 budget. That starts in section 44 of your tracking document, and I'll start by running through those line items. At 44.1.1, there's an addition of $165,915 for various statewide changes, including $155,000 for merit-based pay adjustments, and then other statewide changes for our self-insurance premiums to DOAS and Teamworks billings. Item 44.1.6 is a continuation of an item from our amended budget. It's a $1.1 million in state funds for the employer share of state health and retirement benefits due to our updated staffing policy. As I shared with you under the amended 19 budget hearing, this reflects shifting our personnel and associated costs from Georgia Student Finance Authority to the Georgia Student Finance Commission. We talked about the fact that the authority has had declining revenues significantly since the end of the federal student loan program in 2010, while at the same time experiencing increased health care costs under that private plan. Since 2010, we've eliminated, at the height of it, what equates to a third of our workforce, or 68 positions, in light of that, to reduce those expenses. And this really reflects the final step in transitioning us to a more traditional state agency and to a sustainable funding model for those costs going forward. We have compiled some additional information and backup documentation I believe we shared with you, Mr. Chairman, and with the House Budget Office. We'd be happy to share that with any other members or answer any other questions on that. Item 44.1.7 kind of goes with that. It's a program name change to reflect the change from Hope Administration to Commission Administration, to reflect the fact that these funds now support the entire agency and all of our operation as opposed to just the Hope programs. Under dual enrollment at 44.2.1, $3.4 million to meet projected need, as well as to reflect policy changes to limit participation to 11th and 12th graders, and to change the private award amount paid to our private post-secondary institutions to the average that's paid at the University System of Georgia institutions, which is currently about $158. The next few slides depict a little bit of dual enrollment data and how that impact is felt. Our original projections for FY20 showed that we would need just over $126.7 million. With the governor's recommendation, including these two policy changes, it brings us back down to about $108 million, more in line with what we're seeing, under amended 19. FY18 saw about 17% growth over the prior year, double-digit growth in all of our sectors, 10% growth at university system institutions, 22% growth from our privates, and 18% growth from our technical college systems. Combined, those two policy changes save about $18 million. And I've got a couple slides that will actually show you the impact. This first slide is just a representation of the students in dollars and how they're distributed. That outer ring represents the students and where they're attending. You can see the top blue section, 53% of the students enroll at technical college system institutions, whereas the inner ring reflects the dollars that those institutions receive. So the technical college system institutions receive 36% of the funding for those 53% of the students. So just a recap on where they are. Grade distribution over the last few years has becoming more widespread, distributed evenly through the grades. You can see early on there were very few, and I know it's hard to see with those colors and in your PowerPoints, but very few sophomores and juniors. And as the program has grown in popularity, we see an increasing share of 9th and 10th graders participating. This next slide actually shows you that distribution between 11th and 12th graders and 9th and 10th graders by sector of our institutions. See those 43,000 total students and then how they're broken out. This next slide actually shows you 9th and 10th graders only and where they're attending. So we had about 8,100 students that were enrolled in 9th or 10th grade in high school last year. And you can see that the bulk of them, 5,500, were at our technical college institutions, compared to 1,300 and 1,400 respectively at our university system and private post-secondary institutions. The other changes related to the dual enrollment award amounts. Currently, this slide reflects what we're currently paying. We pay standard undergraduate tuition at university system institutions, about $89 a credit hour at technical college institutions, and currently for our private post-secondary institutions, it's $250 per semester hours. And then all those institutions also receive a book and fee award. The governor's recommended budget includes a change to the award amount we're paying to our private institutions that lowers that award from $250 an hour to $158 per semester hour, and an equivalent reduction in the quarter hour institutions. I'll show you the impact of this. If we look at our FY18 award data, our most recently completed year, we spent $23.9 million at students enrolled in private institutions in dual enrollment. If we would have applied that same proposed award hour rate of $158, it would have been the equivalent of $19.2 million. Now, if we project that out to FY20 following our normal projections, you can see that under current policy with no changes, we would project to spend $41.5 million at our private institutions, whereas with the governor's recommendation, it brings that back down to $33.4 million. Any questions on that?
Members? We may go back and talk about some of this.
I'll move back into our budget items, moving to section 44.7.1. This appears as a reduction of $41.6 million to the HOPE grant, but it's actually a transfer. The HOPE grant program has had appropriated in it about $109 million, and over the last few years we have been lapsing money back. We've only been spending about $60 million of that. So instead of just eliminating it, it's transferring it to the HOPE Public program to meet some of the need that's projected in that program, and you'll see that come back in as an add on the next slide. At 44.7.2, $1 million in existing funds, again, that's still available within current appropriation for HOPE grant, to increase the HOPE grant award rate by 3%, which we would call 103 factor rate. At our private institutions, $7.4 million for HOPE private scholarships to increase the award by 3% and to meet projected need for growth. $302,000 to meet projected need for the Zell Miller portion of our HOPE private scholarships. And then finally, $3 million to actually increase the Zell private award by $500. As you know, in HOPE Public, for our public institutions, the Zell Miller Award pays full tuition, where the private institutions still receive a flat amount. This increases that flat amount by $500. At 44.9.1, moving on to HOPE Public Scholarship, this is where you can see those funds coming back in, but 16.1 to increase the award by 3%. And 41.6 million is the transfer of the HOPE grant funds back into HOPE Public to meet projected need and growth. 9.1 million to cover the projected need and growth for the Zell Miller portion, for a total of 36 million in lottery funds. The REACH program at 44.14.1, we're very appreciative of Governor Kemp's support of this program, as an addition of $5.1 million. Traditionally, the REACH program has been a public-private partnership and funded by a number of different sources. This actually makes the program fully funded, in that all future scholars brought into the program, their scholarships would be 100% paid for by state funds. Currently, the state funds 100% of scholarships in a school system's first year of participation, and then half of the scholarships in every year thereafter. The remainder, 50%, is funded through local school system fundraising efforts, as well as statewide private foundation that raises the remainder of those funds. This shifts that model to be fully funded, brings the program total to about 9.7 a year, and would increase, I believe, HOPE scholars by a rate of about 970 a year. At 44.17.1, statewide changes for our administratively attached agency, Georgia's Non-Public Post-Secondary Education Commission. Their new executive director, Kirk Shook, I believe is with us today if you have questions for him. But those are to cover the merit pay increases and the associated DOAS billings as well. And all told, $36.2 million in lottery funds, $9.8 in state funds, for a net of $46.1 addition to our budget for FY20.
I want to make sure that we're a couple of things as we start to look at the FY20 budget here. Obviously, one of the issues that is going to be dealt with by this committee, and certainly looking at the governor's recommendation, has to do with dual enrollment. So one of the things I want to make sure that the committee understands, and you may elaborate on this, is that those funds, you administer those funds. This is not the Georgia Student Finance Commission decision. I mean, you're simply an arm in which those funds flow through. You're administering the program, keeping up with, the expenditures. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Elaborate. Make sure that
Certainly.
I'm correct.
Those funds are appropriated to our agency. We promulgate rules and regulations as we need to. We perform compliance functions. We host the application and handle customer service for students that needs information on how to apply. But then those funds are dispersed to post-secondary institutions when students attend. The post-secondary institutions in the Georgia Department of Education decide collaboratively what courses to offer, who teaches the courses, who they're offering, what students they're allowing to participate.
I'll make sure the committee, now obviously there is some discussion around the language in the budget. I want to make sure that we understand you're not necessarily the policy maker on this, but you do have some insight as to the administration of the program. Okay. 17, who is 17? Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Chairman Knight. A couple of questions, if I can take you back. And I've been removed from this side of the appropriations for a few years, long ago when I was here. 44.8. The increase in the award for the Zell Miller Scholarship, from 23 to 2,800, I'm fine with that. I get the $500 delta. The question I get: how does that compare to the Zell Miller award on a semester basis for a public institution? I know the tuition at Georgia and the research universities more than some of the others. I know they're staged, but a student gets less even with the Zell, even with that $500 increase, substantially less than if they attend a public university. Is that not still true?
In most instances, I would say that's true. The rates do vary by institution, but I believe at UGA or Georgia Tech, that award is going to be closer to probably $4,500 a semester.
And then that was my question is, and again, I should know, but I've been removed from this committee. So that is on a semester basis,
Chris,
not an
double
annual
check me,
basis?
but yes, sir.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. Well, I'll probably follow up with that later. Going to the TEG, the Tuition Equalization Grant, I think this is probably, a tough subject to going around to spending money, in private institutions. I've always been a fan, and I'm getting to the question, Mr. Chairman, I promise. I've always been a fan of the HOPE money following the student. Our university system and technical college system does well too. $22,800,000 in the TEGs this year. How much? What are we up to in those grants on a semester basis? What are the TEGs now?
I believe it's $900 a year, $950 a year.
$950 a year, and the same requirements for those as for the HOPE.
No, sir. Those actually don't have a GPA
Okay,
requirement.
that's what I was trying to again determine because the nomenclature changed around. So those are just the straight grants for.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. So on 44.14, the Reach Scholarship, there's been some discussion. That's a big change, and how it's been done. It's been a beauty to watch throughout the state the public-private partnership that's been created with the Reach scholarships across the state. So what's the reason? I mean, are you aware of a reason why we're moving to the state funding it all and just kind of doing away with the partnership?
I can't speak totally to that, but I think there are a couple things that play into it. We do know that some local school systems are holding out and have chosen not to participate in that program excuse me, because of the fundraising requirement, especially in our lower economic tier counties that don't feel like they can come up with those. Certainly certain representatives in the House have actually spoken to me about that and their concern over whether or not their communities can participate because they can't raise the funds and can't dedicate the resources. Secondly, what this does is actually change this into really the state's first fully funded needs-based state program. Since there is a component of need in this program, this represents probably the largest investment in a needs-based grade program in the state's history. We certainly would still view this as a public-private partnership, and the fact that we are still relying on our local school systems to commit resources in the form of mentors, academic coaches, doing background checks, appointing a coordinator to transmit data to us so that we can track successes. And the foundation, I think, with full transparency, I think has not seen the level of philanthropic support that we had hoped it would from a statewide level. There's local fundraising, and many of the local counties have been very successful, but the statewide responsibility on the foundation to raise funds has topped $1 million, $1.5 million, and approaching $2 million or more a year, and they've quite frankly had a little bit of trouble raising all of those funds.
If I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. So, I guess mine is, Chairman Epps was a great proponent of this, and you look at some of the counties that he got participation in, Twigs, and some of those in Middle Georgia, some of the Tier 1 counties, and they found the money. Is it an issue of fundraising by the foundation that we're having to move to this?
I don't know that I would put it all on the foundation, sir. I think there's again a lot of things that go into it. Fundraising being a piece of it, and then just fundamentally shifting the design of the program to make it a full state program.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. And so this program's been going on, in their 4th year?
2012,
So we're in
sixth.
5, 6. So what about the past scholars? Are the communities that have these now going to have to go continually raise money, or are they just going to be grandfathered in?
So any community bringing a new scholar on, regardless of when that community started participating, every new scholar next year would be fully funded by the state.
So the young person that got it this next year, the county or school system will still have to raise their share for the next year's funding of that young person who was in 2016.
No, sir. The funds for students are earmarked in the 8th grade, when they're in the 8th grade. So if
Yeah.
their student is already in the program, they are already fully funded.
Okay.
And we hold those funds really in trust for them until they are ready to use them in college.
Okay.
Any new student next year would be 100% funded by the state.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to follow back up because I've first of all I want to make sure that everybody knows. I think the Reach program was one of the most important programs. It's sort of thinking outside the box, and I guess I've got a personal experience because when your mother-in-law is a former retired principal and also was a mentor and part of I'll just go ahead and say it, in the Lamar County. I have a little more, I guess, she's bit my ear about the program. But I think in our conversation, what I thought was important, and I think she conveyed the same sentiment, was that this was a competitive process. This is where everyone had skin in the game. Everyone wanted this. It wasn't necessarily a needs. It was a needs base, but it was a needs base for people who are on the borderline who could go either way. I mean, it was trying to interview these kids, make sure the community was fully bought in, make sure that the whole process was competitive, a very serious process. And I too want to share a little bit of concern about this going totally funded by the state and removing that skin in the game. I always think when I say skin in the game, I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. When you're investing in something, you're more apt to make sure you're participating, you're protecting whatever your investment is. I too have a little bit of fear of this. I see where maybe there's some communities that aren't able to match or meet some of the funding levels, the fundraising. But wouldn't it be better to try to help those out instead of just saying across the board we're just going to fund everything?
I don't know that I can give you a better or worse.
Yeah.
I certainly understand your point, and so noted, and we'd be happy to explore other models with you.
I just want to share that. And again, this is a great program. I just want to make sure that I think there's some concerns among committee members and other representatives that have come to us to make sure that we're protecting the integrity
Sure.
of this program, because they like the program so much, and they think it is really a way to to boost some kids and make sure that they get a chance. So, other comments from the committee before I'm gonna go back and I want to circle back to a little bit, going back to dual enrollment, and while I know that Georgia Student Finance Commission is not necessarily driving the policy and the changes here, but you guys do administer it. I think you're an important part of helping as a data collector per se, making sure that we are measuring the success of this program, or the dual enrollment program, and making sure that we're my dad always told me, he said, you can't manage what you can't measure. And so with that, are there any matrix? What are the things that the Georgia Student Finance, can you give us any matrix or data about the success of the program? And if you can, tell us what it is. If there are areas that are deficient, let us know what maybe tools that we need to give you in order to make sure that we're capturing data so that we can measure the success of the dual enrollment program.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to that just a little bit. And I'll kind of share with you where our thoughts on that are at the moment. I think the biggest thing that we lack in order to measure success or outcome is really just a unified or stated program goal. I think once we all agree on what that is, we'll have a better set of what the metrics should be. We're certainly capable of reporting to you expenditures, projections, who's going where and doing what, but there's some other things that we can't quite project on. We're moving in the right direction. We certainly get college transcript data, or excuse me, high school transcript data from all of our students that participate. And starting this spring, we'll also get college transcript data and be able to match those back. But there's still other things that we don't know that don't quite get reported to us. We don't know the credentials of a professor that's teaching the course, whether it be on a high school campus or a college campus. We don't necessarily know what that student is doing after they leave high school, if they're continuing in a major where these courses were counted or not. So there's some things like that, I think, that depending on what the outcomes really need to be, or what we want to say that those metrics are, that we could work with you to define how we might better collect those things, or what they are that we need to be collecting and requiring.
And one of the questions that as we look at this, and we're trying to make sure that we solidify and protect the dual enrollment. It's such a great program, and again, going back to its purpose. And I think that's to help these high school kids get a jump start on their higher education opportunities, no matter what track it is. But hopefully to hurry up and get through with school a little bit sooner, and better be prepared to get into a job, a career, a profession. Do you have what are the core classes that do you have a list or the data on what the core classes are that we typically see these high school students taking with dual enrollment?
We do have a list. We know what the most popular courses are. We've got some additional data we could share with you. College algebra tends to top the list, rhetoric and composition. But there's really, I think that the entirety of the selection options, there's about 20,000 courses that students could take. And we don't necessarily know what lines up as core or what counts towards what degree within each of those institutions, but there's numerous options.
How many courses?
I think about 20,000.
Okay. But again, and I know depending on the institution and where you're going, there could be a lot of different courses, but we should be able to segregate those courses back into the core.
We attempt to do so. Most of our institutions use unique course numbering systems. So English 1101 is not English 1101 is not English 1101, but we can try to group English and count the instances that what we believe to be similar type courses are occurring and being taken by our students.
So I would assume there are different, for instance, within the USG system, 101 is not 101. I
Correct.
assume the same thing within the technical college system?
Technical college system tends to be a little bit more standardized. Generally, most of their programs, I think their course numbering system is more unified across their system, but certainly within the privates, we would see completely different kind of nomenclature and course numbering patterns.
Okay. So what else, if you had to, you know, your opportunity here to talk to this committee, the tools that we need to give you or help you in regards to making sure that we're capturing the data so that we can come back and measure the success of this program.
Certainly, I think, you know, once we all agree, we can work with some of the metrics that I think audits have suggested and others in performance reviews. It's a good timing, actually. We're working on a rewrite of the actual application system and could incorporate some new data points. But I think looking at the differences in student success rates, matriculation into college after high school graduation, and then their persistence rates through on. There's certain things I certainly would be interested in to see if the classes a student took while they were in high school actually ended up counting towards their major, or if they decided to change major and didn't use the courses that they took. I think one of the things we're interested in is seeing right now under current policy if students are double majoring, if they're staying in school longer, and having some of that information, some of which may be available in Georgia awards right now, but probably not as cleanly as to make it available to us right now.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you so very much, and I'm sure that we will talk again as we try to tackle these issues.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Baxter, you're up next, and I want to, before this committee gets started with your presentation, we had an incident on the floor the other day, and I'm a little bit embarrassed for lack of knowledge and for some things that were said. I first of all want to say thank you to a lot of the schools in your association, the private colleges. They're some of our state's finest universities. You've been a great partner as far as the private colleges in helping make sure that Georgia is one of the best states to live, work, play in. You're helping meet the needs of in areas that we are lacking in. I think one of the areas that we talked about the other day that was a discussion on the floor was in the medical area. And first and foremost, I want to say I'm sorry for what some of the things that were said on that floor, and say thank you personally for what our private colleges have done and will do in the future of Georgia.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm Susanna Baxter, and I represent the private not-for-profit colleges in Georgia. You have on your desk, for those that haven't already received it, a copy of our descriptives, which is our fact book. And you also have before you a district report that highlights the students from your district and the various majors and GPA and institutions that those students are attending within GICA's membership. It doesn't list all of the schools that your students from your district attend, but the top 5. So I hope that that's of interest. If you would like more detail, please let me know. I was asked by the chairman to touch on a couple of issues, so I'm going to speak to both of those. This is a map of our membership. We represent 24 colleges, and they are all SAC-COC not-for-profit institutions domiciled in the state of Georgia and with a primary focus on undergraduate education. Before I touch on the two topics the chairman asked me to cover, I want to remind everybody that Georgia tuition aid follows the student, that students receive the aid, not the institutions, to your point earlier today. I want to focus on the Georgia Lottery. That's one of the topics with the Hope Scholarship. For purposes of this, and you have a copy of the PowerPoints. If you can't read the print, you've got a copy in your packet. The top two lines, if you'll look at that, that represents, the first line represents students attending a University System of Georgia institution, and the middle line are private colleges. The third line is the technical college system. For purposes of the discussion today dealing with Hope Scholarship, I'm only going to speak to the first two because those are the types of institutions that receive the Hope Scholarship Award. To the question earlier that was asked, Chairman, 20 USG institutions have a higher Hope and Zell reimbursement rate than the private college award amount is currently. An important point to note, and we are most appreciative to the governor for the recommendation to add $500 to the Zell scholarship. It is very difficult for not-for-profit private colleges in Georgia to compete with the illusion of free. And Zell has that. Students, because they're going to get tuition, it is hard for us to attract. And we just very recently crossed the 2,000 threshold mark for institutions that within my membership receiving the Zell, for students receiving the Zell award. I'm going to shift topics to dual enrollment if it is, unless there are any questions. Okay. Before you is a list of the institutions, those that are in the bolder black print, are the institutions in Georgia Independent College Association's membership who have chosen to invest in the dual enrollment program. That's 16 of the 24. For the 16 that have chosen to do so, they've chosen because they're committed to serving their communities. This program connects to the mission of a number of these institutions, and they are being asked by their communities to participate. They have invested the dollars, they are committed to academic rigor, they are committed to following all the requirements that SAC-COC has laid out involving dual enrollment specifically. Now, among these, I want to provide just a little bit about the geographic reach. So this is a heat map of students who's attended summer 2017 through fall 2018. And the red portion indicates a higher number or volume of students that are being served. But as you can see, we are in almost every single county offering dual enrollment courses. Students come to a private not-for-profit college from a high school setting, 13% coming from homeschool, 49% coming from a private K-12 high school, and then 38% coming from the public. So we serve the majority coming from a non-public high school background. If you look at GICA's total undergraduate enrollment, 10% of the total enrollment accounts for dual enrollment students. If we look at the subset of GICA member institutions participating in dual enrollment, 18% is the number of total enrollment for that smaller subset of 16. 18% of the students attending those institutions are in dual enrollment.
Now, these are just averages, right?
Yes, just
Okay.
averages.
Okay.
And it leads to, and our numbers are going to be slightly different, I think, from the commission's number, and it's a point in time difference. But we're showing just under 5,000 for dual enrollment in 2018 of students in our sector. Now, I should have said early that Jet Tony, all of you know, our policy consultant and I have agreed to be intentional, proactive, and fully transparent in providing GICA member data. We believe this is a responsibility as a higher education partner with the state. The next slide shows the unduplicated headcount for the institutions participating in dual enrollment, the number of dual enrollment students, and then the percent by institution of dual enrollment students.
Real quick. Are there, so this is just of your membership?
Correct.
Okay.
I only felt permission to speak for the 24
Okay.
that pay me to
No,
speak
that's,
for
I
them.
just want, that's a point of clarification.
Yes. Some other interesting things about the dual enrollment program. The admission standards for dual enrollment programs across our GICA's member institutions is from the majority of them, it's higher than it is for a student who has that high school diploma in hand. For some of them, it's equal, and for one of them, it's less, but it's because they're partnering with a military alternative school for high school students who are in trouble, having real issues. They go through the program and then are permitted, once they prove themselves socially and academically, to enter dual enrollment at this institution. Had they not been a part of that experience and with their GPA what it was, they wouldn't have been included, but because they're in that specific special program. And for this institution, it feels like a real ministry to that community. But overall, the vast majority of schools have higher standards. Methodology, let's talk about that. That was of large interest last year among the legislature. You can see here, this is not a full reporting of all institutions. I've been trying to pull data as fast as possible, but here are the major purveyors of dual enrollment that are in my membership. You can see that we offer courses online, on campus, and at the local high school. I want to speak to the local high school teaching. You can see for a number of institutions, that's the smallest percentage of the way in which classes are delivered. When you think of a class being offered at the local high school, don't assume that that means a high school teacher is teaching it. In some cases, it is particularly with the GICA's membership, there's a partnership with a private faith-based institution or just a private boarding school, and the faculty member leaves the institution and travels because it's just easier for that one faculty member to go versus 20 students to come to the campus. And so that is occurring. And I will also say, in the cases where a high school teacher is teaching dual enrollment courses, that student, by virtue of that of an institution being SAC-COC accredited, that student has to have 18 credit hours in the graduate hours in the subject that they're teaching, and they have to be trained by the college and treated just like any other adjunct faculty member would be treated. So meeting with the department chairs, meeting with the dean, not separated, have an institutional email account, the types of things that SAC-COC says you have control of that course. It's not the high school's course anymore. It really is to look and feel differently. Okay? Now, I have a handout because this is way too small for you to see. So if you'll pull this out, I'm a visual learner. And so in needing to conceptualize this program, it helped me to start with lines and boxes. So if we look at the state contribution for dual enrollment, I'm going to call your attention to the left side of the paper at the top. We have a public high school student who's decided to enter dual enrollment. The Department of Education receives formula funding to the district for the student attending that dual enrollment course. So the same formula they would get if the student was sitting in the high school, they get with dual enrollment. So that's the first payment for the state. The student at the public high school gets to decide, where do I want to go to school? They have a choice: technical college system, university system, or a private college. The next line, the third line, shows you the credit hour payment. And with the university system, you can see the range of credit hours because institutions within their system cost different amounts. What is similar about it is you'll see each student who attends any of these three sector schools gets a $25 book credit hour allowance, and then a $50 student fee, $50 to go toward their student fees. So this is the amount of money that the state's paying depending on where the student is going from a public high school. And then the last piece is within within the public sector, there's an additional payment because the students that attend a public institution are counted in the state formula funding for that sector. So it is a cheaper option to the state for the student to choose a private college. The $250 credit hour rate has been locked in from the beginning of when Move On When Ready was reshaped. It has been locked in, and the credit hour has not been, we've not seen an adjustment there. Obviously, the credit hour at the public institutions goes up every year or every time tuition goes up, which does not necessarily mean every year. If we look to the right-hand side of the piece of paper, the difference here is that we're starting with a private or homeschool high school student who's choosing dual enrollment. So the Department of Ed gets nothing because they're not in that system. The student still has a choice to choose any of these options. The payment is the same for lines 2 and 3. Again, it's a cheaper option. For GICA's membership, 62% of our students are in this right side. So the student, you're not paying the Department of Ed for them, you're not paying a university system or technical college system, they're coming straight in just to a private college. 38% is on the other side with the public school student coming. So the institutions that have chosen to invest in dual enrollment out of GICA's membership have really served the private K-12 homeschool market.
And I apologize for this speaker system. It has been like this for years, so bear with it.
I'm sorry. I'm ready.
Questions? Chairman Martin.
Looking back at a slide you had, I don't know if you can, how far you can reel back, but there you go, there you go. Not to pick an institution other than just looking at the numbers here.
That's
Because
right.
it's the reason I don't value one over the other, and I don't mean to be, but I just look at Truett McConnell University. 58% is online, 38% is at the low cost, so they only teach 4, I guess, at their main or one of their campuses. I don't know if they have a satellite. What types of courses are they delivering online? And what does the content of that course look like? I'm familiar with a little bit, the course materials that are delivered through USG and through some other people, both for undergrad and graduate. And
So
there's a let's just say there's a wide variety of course materials available. So I'm just curious, what types of courses are they delivering, and what do they look like in an online delivery? I guess I'm thinking, and there's a question coming, Doug. I guess I'm wondering if this matches online, if it matches to a 9th or 10th grader, are they acclimated to performing in an online environment? Not that they're not more technically literate than some of us, but that they can do it. But do they fit into to that? And talk to us about the success rates, pass rates, grade rates relative to a professor standing in front of the room or a teacher in front of the room.
Great. Thank you for asking that. A couple of side points here. One, private colleges are different in this program in that private colleges have the ability to choose to participate or not in dual enrollment, and then to set admission standards for what dual enrollment is like. And that would include admission standards, say, of limiting only to a certain grade level or age requirement. In Truett McConnell's instance, they serve 11th and 12th graders, and they are limited to core courses. They have chosen that. They only want to provide core courses. The private colleges that do online education employ the same types of software vendors that we see within the public system for course delivery, so that library resources are available online, or course study packs, that interaction, asynchronous or synchronous learning is occurring and following the standards that are nationally acceptable and expected within quality dual enrollment, quality online programs. Online programs for all of GICA's members, or anybody that is SAC-COC accredited, they're high standards, and those standards have to be met regardless of whether the student is sitting literally in the classroom or not. I can't speak to passage rates for Truett McConnell in particular, but I can get that.
Okay, and brief follow-up if I can, Mr. Chair. Then the next question comes, because we're talking about dual enrollment and cost, and of those courses, is there an eyes wide open? Because again, the student's not paying the bill. The state is, if you will, through HOPE. Are they aware and made aware if you're taking that course at Truett McConnell, but your end game goal is to go to Georgia Tech or Georgia Southern or the University of Georgia? Do they go in eyes wide open? Do they know if they're going to be given credit for that course? Taking that course could be good for them. If they're an English writing course, it could be good for them whether they get college credit or not. But I think from a value proposition relative to HOPE and what we're delivering, it's important to know what percentage of those courses, not just in your universities, but in TCSG and the university system, are taken. I mean, you would assume if the University of Georgia is teaching a course to a dual enrolled child, and then the student comes to the University of Georgia, they would take the course. But I'm worrying about the transferability and the course credit.
I am too, but it is not limited to a GICA member where I am concerned about transferability.
No, I understand.
So-
you just happen to be at the
I
microphone.
wanna-
at the time.
No,
I think
absolutely.
the chairman makes a great question, and I want to reiterate that this is not just
Right.
for
Not you.
our private colleges. This is a question that I've had as we've looked at this. Certainly, President Noble had said that not all 101 English courses are the same, okay? And that's probably true as of not all of these courses are going to be accepted at a future, institution or credited. It's almost like, what are the minimums? Or in this process, this may be something we need to do, because if we're not meeting these goals of dual enrollment, and again, this student has high expectations or is a future engineer or doctor, and they're going down this route. This applies, and I'm gonna say this while you're at the podium. This question will apply to the Technical College System of Georgia and the University System of Georgia. Are we getting the right counseling going forward? So if that dual enrollment student, wants to go to a Georgia Tech or a University of Georgia or more of a research and head down that role, is there counseling there that says, hey, this is a good course for you to take, or don't waste your time, you need to look for another enrollment, another course that you can enroll in that we know that's your expectations down the road?
So I'll answer broadly.
Okay.
You are asking really good questions, and you're not asking a question that I have been in many dual enrollment meetings, and this question comes up a lot. And part of the problem in measuring it is the data that we have. We don't have enough cohorts through the system. And even if we trusted the Georgia Awards data in dual enrollment, part of the problem is a school will flag somebody dual enrollment, and when the title of the program was Move On When Ready, it was really clear. We were talking about Move On When Ready. But now that it's an enrollment status of dual enrollment, it becomes tricky to know, are we talking big D, big E, or little d, little e? So for example, Point University and Covenant are on the border. Covenant College participates in dual enrollment, but you saw none of their data here because they don't work through the state program. All of their students come over from Chattanooga. They're full-paying students coming over. So that's where I talk about the data. We're not sure. We've got to really look at all of the data and make sure that the flag for dual enrollment is really there and work. We're working toward that. When we're talking about courses transferring, it really is to say it depends. If the student sticks to core courses and depending on what they want to major, I think in an ideal scenario, if the student wants to major in chemistry, they would take dual enrollment on everything but chemistry. They head to the school where they want to major in chemistry, and they take every course to get the right sequence of all the exact courses that their new home institution wants. Some of dual enrollment students actually stay at the institution where they did dual enrollment, and in those cases, 100% of those courses are accepted. We don't know the answer for a course being accepted by another institution. We can look at the Articulation Agreement, and I talked about this earlier at the previous committee. The Articulation Agreement that we have with the technical college system is going to, for those 80 courses, will translate over that those courses, they will count, but again, not necessarily how they were going to count. Are they going to count as that course, as a core course to meet toward your general education requirement, or is that course going to count toward an elective? And we don't know what bucket they're going to go in, and we don't have the data to share all of that. I will say that SAC-COC does require academic advising, and I cannot speak as to whether all sectors, and even within my membership, that all are doing that. We've brought SACs out to talk to our membership. We've had, like Toccoa Falls College recently went through a SAC-COC visit. They participate quite a bit in dual enrollment, and they received kudos for their dual enrollment and what they were doing. They are providing advising. We want a scenario where students are being steered correctly based on what they want to be, so that students aren't being harmed by taking a sequence of courses that they had no business taking, that somebody in college would have said, you don't take those 3 courses in combination in the same semester.
Yeah.
But you'd also want, to your point, what do you want to do, where do you want to go, and let's walk this through. But our courses are the same standards. SACs requires standards across courses, so our standards are going to be the same as the student attending another public institution, say.
And again, I want to make sure not only the committee, but everybody in audits, I think Dr. Baxter, you're the first one that's testified. So some of these questions, again, I hope you know that this is not just peppered at,
I welcome
at
the
the private,
conversation.
colleges. I will inform the committee. We will ask and in fact do a deep dive into the technical college system and the university system. So please, I want to make sure that you know that.
I welcome the conversation.
Because again, I'm even in this conversation, I'm learning some things, and I think, again, I want this committee to go back as we talk about this dual enrollment. What is our purpose? A lot of times we put programs in, and sometimes purpose is, it gets blurred. And so this is a good point. You mentioned core versus elective. Was the purpose of dual enrollment to go ahead and get your electives out of the way? PE or whatever it could. It's been so long, so I don't even want to go there. I'm looking at things when I was there, but or is that to start with those core classes that we knew we were going to take? English is the maths, your comments pose, I think, questions that I think the committee needs to look at as we go back and make sure that we're absolutely sure what our purpose is, or make sure we clarify what the purpose of this is. One of the things, and this is the accounting in me, on your slide there, Toccoa Falls, I'm not sure how 57.81%, 85%, and 29%.
I should have verified because you did the same thing when I saw the number. So what that speaks to, though, is a course, the same course may be offered in different methodology. So it's not going to add to 100 across the range. So of the courses they offer, 85% of them are offered on campus, but 57% of them are also offered online. So you might have the same course, just different sections. One of them's taught in bricks and mortar. One of them is taught online, and some they actually send a professor.
That helps a lot. I didn't understand that. Maybe I'm not
I
the
should
only-
have said that because that
because
caught my eye
I
too.
took that to mean that the number of sections that were being taught, like 58% of the dual enrollment was done at Truett McConnell Online. That may be in what you're saying, and that's 58% of the coursework. But 90% of the students may be taking the 4%. That's probably not the case. But
I want you to
got
walk
it.
through, because I think this needs clarification, because I think as we look and evaluate this, we are looking at in a deeper dive. So go through. Let's walk through that example of COLA, or put it in real life, or make sure we.
Okay, so
understand it.
I mean, I can start with Andrew College. They're the top line. That may be easier for people to find. So the question, the survey question that was asked was, of your dual enrollment courses, what's the modality or the delivery mode for those courses? So if I'm a student, how would I have access to that course? At Andrew, of the courses that are available for dual enrollment students, so they're on the approved DOE list, 10 and a quarter, 10% are available online. So the student doesn't have to go to Andrew to get it. 89.74% are on the campus.
These are the courses that are on.
Correct. It's
This
not-
is
that's
not.
not
This is not
usage.
the student.
Correct.
This is not. Okay.
Correct. I see where you're going, and I did not ask that question. I only asked where could students get, where would students have that? I think that's what I asked. I need to go back. Now I'm getting muddled in my thinking. But I think what I asked is percentage of courses that were being delivered. We'll circle back with you.
So yeah, of the course list, and quite frankly, we may want to look at it also the other way, because I know there are questions that I've gotten from committee members. And again, let me tell you, these are things that are going to be hashed across the board. But you know, if we are delivering dual enrollment, you know, what percentage of the student, you know, where is it done? And let me go ahead and expand on this. Online digital. We've heard testimony from USG. We've always, you know, been hard on these fees, these book fees. Obviously, that's a barrier to any student. I don't care where you're at. So I know that we've heard testimony even in the amended budget from USG that we're trying to make sure that they're converting these curriculums into digital format, okay, or online. So we're looking at ways of cutting the cost to students. So if we've got an online class, that may or may not be digital, but things like that, you know, that's where I think people are going to need clarification, because I think there's a thought or a process that says, hold on a second, where are we abusing, or maybe really getting outside of you're getting a little bit more than what the cost is. We always know we're going to protect taxpayer dollars. So if you're doing things online and we've got this $25 book fee, but yet per semester hour, okay, well, that could add up a lot. But if you're doing this digitally, online, you know, are the costs matching up with the expenses?
Right, and one thing I would inject into that conversation is that having an online course is not necessarily translates to digital, nor to a cheaper delivery method. So it might be that when you're online, you're renting your textbook. So it's digital, but it's not free. And rental textbooks, digital textbooks, are more expensive than print ones. And so, which is counterintuitive, but that's how the marketplace is, or at least was several years ago when I was looking into it.
I've got a question, and as we look at this, and I think going back to the map, dual enrollment, I think, can serve different needs. And as you look at the hot spots, let me get to my slide. Well, we'll use, was it? Okay. Geographically, okay, you've got some red up in metro areas, and you've got some red in some very rural areas. Is there any correlation, or is there any reason why in certain that we're seeing hot spots in different areas? Are we serving different needs? From a perspective of maybe in rural areas, the need for dual enrollment is maybe greater because there's not as much AP classes. And again, that's a leading question. I don't want that to be the answer, but do you see where I'm going with this?
Absolutely. I think there's two phenomenon that are probably happening, and I don't have a map to show this overlay. As I understand, in talking extensively with the president at Bruton Parker College, for example, with what they are offering with dual enrollment, They are in South Georgia. There are a number of private, particularly Christian-affiliated institutions whose parents want their child to have this experience, but don't want them to go to a secular institution. And so they have found comfort in having Bruton Parker College in Montgomery County serve as that. So Bruton Parker offers some on the ground and then also some online to allow that student, if it's too far to drive, to take that course. So I think that's some of the shading that you see. I will say, in, say, Young Harris is a good example in Young Harris, Georgia. In the county surrounding Young Harris, there was not the ability to offer AP. And so Young Harris, for years, had been sending a faculty member to teach AP courses at the high school because that was a part of their town down service to their community and commitment and investment. When dual enrollment came along, well then, okay, it'll be sure thing for credit. And so Young Harris was sending professors to teach dual enrollment instead of AP because there wasn't that expertise at the high school. So you have some long-standing relationships across the state. I think that best accounts for the shading that you see. Obviously, Metro, there's just more students, so there's going to be greater volume. But it doesn't mean if you look at the list of GICA members that provide dual enrollment, that's I don't have many in Metro. These are serving suburban or rural locations. I only have Oglethorpe in Atlanta proper. And Oglethorpe participates in a very small way in the dual enrollment program.
Committee is diminishing. It's only 4:12. I mean, this is
We got another
it's
45
not-
minutes.
It's not quitting time. Any other? Okay. Trying to think if I had some. One second, I'm trying to go back through some notes to make sure I covered some questions.
got all
If
the
you give
time
me
you
one
need.
second. You may. You're.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation part that I was able to make. The question I have is about SACS accreditation
Yes.
and the way we were talking about the transfer of credits earlier, and I'm not sure if your member organizations are all SACS accredited.
Yes, sir. It's a requirement to be a member of the Georgia Independent College Association because we believe that SAC-COC accreditation is superior.
Okay. And what type of articulation agreement do y'all have with the public universities as far as transferability of credits? For example, I mean, I'll give you a real good example. It would be like if my son who attends Tech or attended Tech wanted to take some courses at Emory, how would that work?
So institutions set their own policy, public and private, about what courses they would take. So, let me go back to articulation, and then kind of you asked several questions in one.
Yes,
Articulation agreements, the Georgia Independent College Association has a sector-wide agreement. Several commissioners ago with the technical college system, we put in place, I want to say 2012, a comprehensive articulation agreement with the technical college systems for students who were at the technical college system who wanted to transfer to a Georgia Independent College Association member institution. We renewed that and expanded it to be over 80 courses over the in 2018. Now, for something to articulate, or for me as an institution to be able to accept it, I've got to teach it. So let's take the technical college system, not to pick on them, but that's the articulation agreement we have. Some of their schools teach in nutrition and health. I'm not sure the exact title of it, but something along those lines. Some of my schools have a similar course, some do not. If they don't, SAC says you can't take that credit. because it doesn't articulate across. It's not the same equivalency of something you have, okay? We have individual institutions that have agreements with the technical college system as well, with a particular school, maybe on a track that they've got, and they specify law enforcement or some track. With the university system, we are eager to put an articulation agreement in place. We just have not done that yet. Of institutions, that doesn't mean that my individual institutions don't have articulation agreements to help students move between the two systems. So it's there, and it gets back to the earlier conversation about how the course is treated. But SACS-COC sets standards, and so within the educational community, and I'm not sure that all dual enrollment participating institutions are SACS-COC accredited, because I can't speak to the other for-profit or private institutions that are in dual enrollment. But for SACS-COC, there's some high standards that are required for dual enrollment. Dual enrollment has taken off in many states, and just like it has in Georgia. And so SACS-COC came out in June of this past year with a guidance letter saying, okay, everybody's getting really into dual enrollment, and we've always had these standards, but we want to remind you what they are. And so I know as a sector, we brought SACS-COC and the person who oversees dual enrollment to come meet with our presidents to make it really clear, what do they mean by control when they write that in the document? And I'm sure the other sectors have done the same due diligence on making sure that they don't lose or put in jeopardy their SACS-COC accreditation, because we do believe that that's a high standard nationally, is to be SACS-COC accredited.
Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up?
Yes.
So basically, the courses are transferable within your organization if there's a similar courses at both institutions offered.
Or I'm going to clarify or ask a clarifying question to your question and continue. But I heard that there was more of a formal agreement with the technical college system in Georgia of about 80 classes. So that's sort of at the Independent College Association level, if you're a member here, and we've got the whole technical college system. At that high level, we've established 80 courses that are programs that articulate.
Correct, and I will. The caveat there is some of GICA members, they take all 80 because they have an equivalent course on campus. Some might only take 50 because they didn't have nutrition and some of the other courses that might be a core requirement for a technical college system, but isn't considered core at that school.
But also, there's a different level of articulation, which is you may have one of your schools that may be in partnership with another institution, very specifically. You mentioned law enforcement or police or whatever, and that's more at a local level where there has been a specific, private college that's a member of your association, and a specific technical college that has done it at a local level instead of a global level. Is that?
That is correct. And you do not have to have an articulation agreement in place to have courses transfer. It makes it easier as a consumer to have an articulation agreement because everybody's already agreed, but it's not prohibitive. So students could, a UGA student could transfer to Stanford. UGA doesn't have to have an articulation agreement with Stanford. Stanford's going to review it and decide.
That's my question. Is what we talked about the technical college system and we talked about the independent colleges. Now, is it on a one-on-one basis with the university system where Morehouse would have an agreement with Georgia State specifically, or is it SACS related where if you, like you have with the technical college system, how does that work within the university system?
Okay, to be clear, articulation agreements are not a requirement of SACS-COC. It is about helping the consumer, in this case the student, move back and forth as needed and to give them a pathway. Within the university system, we do not have a sector-wide agreement.
Okay. Okay.
So it is up to the individual institution, and where you would see articulation agreements is
Okay.
where two registrars are constantly in conversation with one another about, well, now, do we take this, and what's this course, and what major is it required for, and what's the rigor, and asking those questions where they get tired of talking and say, well, let's write this down and formalize it.
Yeah.
And that's, an exaggeration, but that's how those agreements, when the pipeline moves a lot, then an articulation agreement would be set up. But that doesn't mean a school that's never sent somebody to the new home institution wouldn't take the course. But-
there hasn't been a formal agreement like you have with the public.
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Again, I want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for what the private institutions, the private colleges within this, your association do. We've all grown up, and I've heard these names since I was a little boy, and they are part of Georgia. They're part of what makes Georgia great and what they do for Georgia. And I want to say thank you. And I want to make sure you understand these questions are going to get asked just as hard at the other sectors. So I think the idea here is that we want to make sure that we're protecting dual enrollment and making sure we're defining the mission, what its purpose is, make sure how do we make sure it's going forward. And obviously I think the rise, as your numbers showed, that's across the system. We're seeing, to everyone in the audience, we're seeing an increase in cost that, quite frankly, has been unchecked. And every now and then we've got to go back and check it. We're still dealing with taxpayer dollars. We want to make sure we're meeting the mission and we're doing it efficiently. And so thank you, Dr. Baxter. I sincerely appreciate you standing up here and being the first one to go.
Glad to. Seriously, I welcome the opportunity to be a part of conversations to improve the policy behind this program. As you know, private colleges are invested in this program and would love to see an equitable discussion about how the program can be tweaked. And so I appreciate your time today and listening to me.
Thank you so much. With that, I think that is the agenda, unless there's any other comments from the committee. Go.
Yeah, thank you. Full disclosure, my daughter is a graduate of Burnell. So.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone for coming today. We will continue with hearings, and especially there will be a focus on dual enrollment to make sure that we evaluate what's been put in the budget and see how we go forward, see what's best for everyone in Georgia. Thank y'all. Next meeting, 2 p.m. 403 Capitol. Tomorrow's meeting.